So, have you ever actually stopped to think about the absolutely deadliest fads humanity has ever gone through? I mean, we all know social trends are incredibly powerful, right? Whether it's hoarding the latest completely useless gadget or participating in some bizarre internet challenge, it's like we're hardwired to crave something to just ooh and ah at. But what happens when that completely normal, innate human desire for entertainment or beauty or even a medical cure goes horribly, and I mean fatally, wrong?
Look, today we might roll our eyes at, say, harmless modern fads. You know the ones, people doing synchronized TikTok dances right in the middle of a grocery store aisle. But we really need to compare that to the lethal historical realities of our ancestors. Because back in the 1930s, dance crazes, they weren't just a way to get likes on a screen. They were genuinely fatal survival stunts, fueled by a total economic collapse. The contrast between our relatively safe digital trends today and the brutally physical life and death trends of the past, it's honestly staggering.
All right, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer on The Deadly Price of Being Human, history's most fatal trends. We're going to explore the historical hubris, the absolute absurdity, and the genuinely shocking lengths people have gone to just to fit in, stay healthy, or find a quick thrill. Think of this as a curated tour through some of the absolute worst, most dangerous decisions ever made en masse.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, fashion to die for. Then, deadly human endurance. Third, cures that actually killed. And finally, embarrassing royal exits.
Okay, starting off with part 1, fashion to die for.
So, for centuries, vanity and societal pressure have literally been a matter of life and death. People willingly destroyed their bodies just to hit the elite beauty standards of the time. And for nearly a millennium, 1,000 years, this pressure was devastating. Take the timeline of foot binding. It started way back in the 10th century under the Tang dynasty. The story goes that an emperor fell in love with a concubine dancing on bound feet shaped like crescent moons. And well, from there, the idea spread like wildfire as a massive status symbol. Women and young girls, some literally just 4 or 5 years old, had their toes repeatedly broken and folded flat under the sole of their foot. All for what? A tiny 4-inch lotus foot. It caused excruciating pain, deadly bacterial infections, gangrene, yet it stuck around for nearly 1,000 years. It peaked in the 19th century and wasn't formally banned by the Chinese government until 1949. Wild.
Now, European royalty went to equally horrifying lengths just for the perfect complexion. Venetian ceruse was an incredibly popular cosmetic paste back in the 16th century. Queen Elizabeth I famously used it. To get that pale, porcelain, I don't have to work in the sun royalty look, they literally painted their faces with poison. No joke. It was made by mixing white lead carbonate with water and vinegar. And sure, it covered up smallpox scars brilliantly, but it also leached directly into their bloodstream. We're talking hair loss, rotting skin, crippling headaches, and permanent nervous system damage. They essentially chose a ghostly white complexion over, a functioning brain.
But the Victorian era was arguably the absolute peak of lethal fashion. Just look at these 3 fatal flaws. First up, Scheele's green. This was a beautiful, incredibly vibrant green dye used in dresses, wallpaper, fake flowers, you name it. The catch? It was made of copper arsenite, basically pure arsenic. Women wearing or making these items would develop oozing skin sores and actually vomit bright green liquid. Then you have the crinoline. These massive steel cage dresses could be 6 feet wide. They were highly flammable, walk-in kindling in a world lit entirely by fire. Thousands of women tragically burned to death when their dresses just brushed against a fireplace. And third, for the men, the stiff high collar. These things were starched so rigidly that if a gentleman drank a little too much and passed out in a chair, his head would slump forward and the collar could, and literally did, choke him to death in his sleep.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Deadly Human Endurance.
So fashion definitely wasn't the only way people put themselves in mortal danger. Let's talk about the totally baffling, physically devastating things people did just for public spectacle, entertainment, or desperate survival. Imagine like the 1920s equivalent of a Mr. Beast's Extreme Challenge, and you get flagpole sitting. Popularized by a stuntman named Alvin Kelly, people would balance on these towering wooden poles hundreds of feet in the air for weeks at a time. And crowds would actually buy tickets just to stand on the ground and watch a guy sit. Kelly's personal best was 49 days, but balancing up there through harsh weather, sleep deprivation, malnutrition, it was incredibly risky. One slip and gravity took over. Professional sitters tragically plummeted to their deaths when their setups just gave out.
But sitting was a breeze compared to moving. 157. Just let that number sink in for a second.
157 is the record number of consecutive days a couple managed to stay in motion during the Great Depression's dance marathon craze. With the economy in total collapse, these marathons went from quirky entertainment to literal desperate survival. Promoters offered free food, a roof over their heads, and a huge cash prize to whoever danced the longest. Couples practically dragged each other around a floor for 5 whole months, getting maybe minutes of sleep at a time. It was straight-up human torture. Amateur dancers literally dropped dead of exhaustion right on the dance floor before the authorities finally stepped in and outlawed the events.
And here's another staggering number for you: 40,000. That is how many people eagerly gathered in Texas for the 1896 Crash at Crush. The whole premise was simple and, quite frankly, wildly dangerous. Railroad organizers thought it'd be a super fun spectacle to take 2 decommissioned full-size steam locomotives, point them at each other on the same track, and just let them crash head-on at 50 miles per hour. They expected maybe 20,000 people. Double that showed up. So when the trains collided, the boilers violently exploded. It sent red-hot shrapnel flying right into this massive crowd, killing spectators instantly. But you know what the absolute craziest part is? The crowd didn't even run away. They actually ran toward the wreckage to grab souvenirs. You can't make this stuff up.
Okay, on to Section 3, cures that actually killed.
As bizarre as those spectacles were, they honestly pale in comparison to how misguided medical science actively accelerated patients' demises, all while promising to heal them. Consider the really dark irony of the late 1890s. Society was dealing with a massive morphine addiction problem. So the pharmaceutical company Bayer stepped in and introduced a brand new, supposedly non-addictive miracle alternative for coughs and colds. They called it heroin. Guys, it was even prescribed to children. But look at the biological steps here. When you ingest Bayer's heroin, which is diacetyl morphine, the human body acts like a chemical lab. Through a process called biological deacetylation, the liver just strips away the acetyl groups, completely metabolizing the medicine right back into pure, highly potent morphine. So instead of a cure, Bayer inadvertently created a faster-acting, incredibly powerful form of the exact drug they were trying to replace, causing mass respiratory failure and a whole new wave of intense addiction.
Incredibly, a simple typo, yes, a typo, led to literal medical cannibalism. Back in the 12th century, Europeans were translating ancient Arabic medical texts. These texts highly praised a natural healing black pitch from the Middle East called mumia. But the European translators got a bit confused. They knew ancient Egyptian embalmed bodies also used a black pitch, so they mistranslated the word to mean the human corpses themselves. And just like that, a massive European craze began of grinding up stolen Egyptian mummies into fine powder. People snorted mummy dust for nosebleeds, they swallowed it for stomach aches, completely oblivious to the fact that they were just eating dusty, deceased humans, all because of a translation error. And if eating mummies wasn't bad enough, physicians in the 18th and 19th centuries were totally obsessed with balancing the body's 4 humors by violently purging bad fluids. Their absolute weapon of choice? Calomel. It was marketed as a miracle cure for literally everything, from syphilis to ingrown toenails. But calomel is just mercury chloride. Doctors prescribed it in massive, so-called heroic doses. The side effects? Severe dehydration, rampant hair loss, your teeth literally falling out of your skull, and eventually hypovolemic shock and complete organ failure. Patients were actively being poisoned to death by their own doctors, all in the name of health. Which brings us to the tragic brutality of the transorbital lobotomy, championed by American Dr. Walter Freeman in the mid-20th century. To supposedly cure mental illnesses like schizophrenia or even just anxiety, doctors would perform this procedure in a matter of minutes. Step 1. Position a sharp, ice pick-like tool called an orbitoclast behind the patient's eye socket. Step 2. Use a literal hammer to tap it through the thin layer of bone into the brain. Step 3. Wiggle the tool to sever the connections of the frontal lobe. It was shockingly simple and horrifyingly destructive. Over 50,000 lobotomies were performed in the US alone, tragically turning vibrant, living humans into emotionally void, apathetic shells who lost all their creativity and personal identity.
All right, let's wrap up with Section 4, embarrassing royal exits.
Let's step away from the medical horrors and release some of that accumulated tension. Because as it turns out, having immense wealth, giant armies, and absolute power, it absolutely cannot save you from your own clumsiness. There is a hilarious yet stark contrast between ultimate power and pathetic ends. Let's do a rapid-fire rundown. First, French King Charles VIII. He was a military conqueror who survived the brutal Italian wars only to aggressively hit his head on a low stone doorframe while walking to watch a tennis match. He fell into a coma and died 9 hours later.
Then we have ancient China's Duke Jing, a powerful military ruler who ate a bad bowl of unripe wheat, scrambled to the restroom, broke the wooden seat, fell into the cesspit beneath it, and literally drowned in human waste. Over in Europe, the twice-crowned king of Poland, Stanislaw Leszczynski, survived massive wars of succession, only to fall asleep near a fireplace in his old age. His silk robes caught a rogue spark, and he died of horrific burns. And finally, King Alexander of Greece, who survived all the politics of World War I, only to break up a fight between his dog and a palace monkey. Well, a second monkey jumped in, bit him on the leg, and the king died of severe sepsis just days later at the age of 27. I repeat, defeated by a monkey.
So the absolutely crucial point to take away from all this history is that hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? Whether it's putting toxic lead on our faces, destroying our nervous systems with mercury, risking our lives on a flagpole for a quick buck, or, tripping into a royal toilet, humanity has a very long track record of staggering hubris. We always think we know what's best, what's fashionable, and what's safe in the moment, which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to reflect on. As we go about our modern lives with our crazy diets, our internet challenges, and all those cutting-edge wellness hacks, which of today's deeply cherished trends will historians be laughing at or completely horrified by in 100 years? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the trends and always